The Seattle Seahawks are a sneaky good team on the New York Giants' 2023 schedule of opponents. And we're going to learn more about them from Locked On Seahawks host Corbin Smith. That's coming your way next here on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. My name is Patricia Traina. Happy as always to have you with us as we continue our look at the New Giants opponents for 2023. And joining me on today's show is Corbin Smith. He is the host of Locked On Seahawks. Corbin's going to tell us everything we need to know about Seattle and then some. So Corbin, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. It's always a blast.
Yeah, absolutely. I always love getting together with fellow Locked On hosts. And Corbin, let's jump right into, into this. I want to start with Jackson Smith-Njigba, the new receiver that they picked up in the draft. Where does he fit into the offense for the Seahawks?
There was a lot of discussion when the Seahawks took a receiver in the first round about where the target's going to be, how are they going to get the football to him, but he's such a different style receiver from DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, and you look at what has held this offense back. They were ninth in the NFL in scoring last year, but second half of the season, they were not near as productive putting points on the board. They struggled to convert third downs. In fact, they had the worst third down percentage in the last 8 games of the season, 28.1%. And what has been missing is that receiver from the slot that can be a consistent chain mover in the middle of the field. And that is what Jackson Smith-Njigba excels at. He's really good at finding his way past the marker, catching passes over the middle, contested catches, and being able to get away from guys. He's not a 4-4 burner, but this is a player that has elite acceleration. So when he gets the football in his hands, he's able to create after the catch. He's got strong lower body. He can break tackles. So I actually think that this is one of those situations where Smith-Njigba plays the way the Seahawks envision he's going to, being that chain mover that can really attract attention in the middle of the field. Teams are not going to be able to do that double teaming on DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett like they've been able to do schematically at times the last couple of years, because if you do that, Smith-Njigba is going to destroy you. So it's going to create results of open field, downfield examples for Lockett and Metcalf where they're going to be on one-on-ones, and Geno Smith is going to be licking his lips when he gets those opportunities. So I view it as they're going to give him targets, but it's going to change how defenses are going to be able to defend this team for the better for Metcalf and Lockett being open downfield and doing what they do well.
Now, also the Seahawks have a couple of tight ends. They have Noah Fant, Will Dissly. They've been added into the mix. How does their presence shape what we might be seeing from the Seahawks offense this year?
This is the position group that I think is going to be most negatively impacted by Smith-Njigba's arrival, at least in terms of targets, because there's only one football on the field, and you know that Pete Carroll is going to want to run the ball. They've got 2 second-round picks in the backfield from the last 2 years. So I think the tight ends, in terms of volume, it's just not going to be there. Fant, Dissly, Parkinson, they've got some really good tight ends there. I just don't know when the opportunities are going to be there for them to make plays in the passing game. But I will say this, especially for Colby Parkinson being 6'7", soft hands, really good athlete, that is a matchup nightmare in the red zone. That is the one area that I could see this tight end group making a big impact. I just don't see a lot of targets and a lot of receptions there unless there's injuries at receiver. Hopefully that doesn't happen, but I just don't see many opportunities. There'll be a few games where tight ends factor more into the passing game plan, but with the 3 receivers, they have the running game, they have the running backs can catch the football. I'm just not sure they're going to put up the numbers that necessarily match the talent that's in that position group. I think it's a really solid tight end group. I just don't know there's going to be many targets going their way in the passing game with all the other weapons Seattle has assembled with its skill positions.
Last year, Geno Smith had we'll call it a comeback year, not necessarily a breakout year, but a comeback year. earned himself a new contract. What does Gino have to do in this next year at the helm at quarterback to take his game to the next level?
He's got to cut down on some of the bad decisions that he made in the second half of the season. And I don't think all of this was on him. The offensive line regressed in the second half. I mean, they had 2 rookie tackles playing, and they were not as good in the second half. I think they just got worn down. It's a longer season than you play in college. Those 2 players, Charles Cross and Abraham Lucas, though, are going to be going into their second season. They know what to expect now. I'm expecting a big jump from both those players. I think the O-line in general is going to be better. That's going to make it that Geno Smith doesn't have so much weight on his shoulders in terms of trying to get the football out quickly, rushing decisions. He wasn't doing that the first half of the year, and I feel like he was pressing some late last season. So I think improving the O-line and then having that security blanket in Smith and Jigba in the middle that they have not had, he's going to be able to unload the football to that security blanket, and it's going to take a lot of pressure off them too. But I feel like if he can do that and he can avoid some of the sacks that he was taking late, trying to make things happen late in the season, if he can eliminate the turnovers, lower those a little bit, and be a little bit quicker getting the football out of his hands instead of taking sacks, then I feel like he's got everything set in front of him to not only touch the numbers he had last year, but be better this season. He's got a better receiving core than he already had. He's got 2 stud running backs behind him, a line that I expect is going to be much improved. Those tight ends, maybe they're not going to have great numbers, but when you need them, they're going to be quality assets in the passing game and in the blocking game. They have as good of a supporting cast as you are going to find in the NFL for Geno Smith. And, oh, by the way, this will be the first time that he has started 2 years in a row in the NFL with the same play caller. And that is also going to aid him tremendously, working with Shane Waldron, who could be a head coaching candidate in this next cycle coming up after this year if Geno Smith continues to play like he did last year or takes another step forward.
Where does Kenneth Walker III fit in? I mean, especially given the improvements they've made in the passing target area.
He's going to still be the bell cow. I know a lot of people, when they picked Zach Charbonnet, were thinking, oh, this is going to be a timeshare 50-50. I am not envisioning that. Charbonnet is going to get his opportunities. I think where he may steal from Ken Walker III, reps in the red zone, which if you're a fantasy owner, that's going to make Charbonnet more appealing because he's going to vulture touchdowns potentially. But Ken Walker III is going to get his touches in the run game, in the passing game. He averaged 17 touches per game last year. I think he's going to get to that number, if not exceed it this year, because I anticipate Seattle is going to be better on third down, which means longer drives, sustained drives, more opportunities to get the football to all of your playmakers, including the running backs. So Charbonnet is going to have his role in this offense. There's a reason they picked him in the second round, but this is still Ken Walker III's backfield after being the runner-up for Rookie of the Year, and he's got a chance to have another really good season, especially with the upgraded offensive line that's going to be blocking in front of him.
Hey, Giant fans, take your first swing at betting on Major League Baseball at FanDuel and get 10 times the amount of your first bet in bonus bets up to $200. That's right. Just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 to spend on betting on everything from the money line to the over-under to who you think is going to hit the first home run. All of that on an app that is safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you can get paid instantly. There's no better place to bet on Major League Baseball than on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, the official sports partner of Major League Baseball. Where does Seattle's offense really need to pick it up from last year? Where did they struggle most? And do they have what they need in order to address that weakness?
It's funny that you mentioned that question. I'm going to do a little bit of self-advertising here. I actually wrote a lengthy article today on all Seahawks on the Fan Nation Network for SI, looking at 4 areas the Seahawks really struggled last year. And one of them was the run game on early downs. They were near the bottom of the league in success rate and EPA per play on early downs, and they had a lot of negative plays, and it kept going back to the offensive line. They were near the bottom of the league in adjusted line yards, according to Football Outsiders. So they were not able to create the push they needed to. I feel like the upgrades they've made in the interior offensive line with more upside, younger players in that group, that they're going to be able to move the ball a little bit better in the run game, and that's going to make better third down situations. Last 8 games, they had almost a full yard more to go on third downs than they did in the first 9 games, and that's why they were so abysmal. That extra yard, that is a big deal. It really makes it difficult for the quarterback and everybody else to move the chains. I expect those areas are going to get cleaned up in large part because the offensive line. That's really the focal point here. Better pass protection overall, better run blocking. That's going to lend itself to early down running being more effective, more efficient, and your passing game on third down being more efficient, longer, more sustained drives. If they can do those things and eliminate a few of the turnovers, they had a lot of issues turning the ball over in opposing territory last year. You just eliminate 4 or 5 of those, they probably win 11 or 12 games last year. That's how big of a difference it was for them. So those are the areas they have to clean up. And I feel like the additions they've made, Smith and Jigba is going to help with third down immensely. The O-line should be better for both pass blocking and run blocking. And even the turnover situation, those extra weapons around, there should be fewer balls hitting the turf, fewer interceptions with the talent that they've got there.
Let's take a look now at the Seahawks defense. I think the big question a lot of people are wondering about is Jamal Adams. Where is he in his rehab? Do you think he will be ready? And more importantly, and I know this is hard to predict, but can he be the player he was prior to the injury?
I think that he can be, but that is going to be tricky to know until we actually see him on the field, especially coming back from a torn quad tendon. That is an injury that has a pretty bad rate of return in professional sports. It's a rare injury. There have been plenty of guys that make it all the way back, but then you have guys like Victor Oladipo in the NBA that was an all-star, and he's still playing in the league, but he's never been the same player since he came back from the injury. So we won't know the answer to that until we see him on the field. From everything that I've been told, he looks really good. He's got his mobility back, so that is a plus. I think there's a very good chance he's ready for week 1. I don't know if he's going to be ready to start training camp. They might start him on the PUP list and then bring him back midway through. They are going to be cautious and make sure he's 100% back, but they need him to be a game wrecker the way that they expected he was going to be. And even if he's not fully the player that he was before this injury, can he still get after the quarterback as a blitzer? Can he still defend tight ends in coverage? Those are the things they're really going to need him to do for this defense to play to its potential. And again, from what I've been told, he's moving well. That is the first key, is the mobility back, because if he's able to move the way he did before the injury, you know the physicality and the mindset's still going to be there for him. And then he's just got to avoid the injuries that have plagued him the last couple of years.
What does Devin Witherspoon bring to the Seattle defensive secondary?
Nastiness, physicality, hard-hitting mentality. I mean, I watched him, Patricia, on film about 3 or 4 months ago. I already knew who the player was, but I watched some tape, and I turned on the Indiana-Illinois game, and literally the first play of the game, before the snap is even happening, he knows that it is a bubble screen, and he pretty much decapitated the receiver on the play. And that just instantly screamed to me, that is a Pete Carroll player. This guy is downhill. He smacks people. Incredibly high football IQ. He knows what teams are doing before they snap the football. That helps him get in position for interceptions. He led the country in pass breakups last year. And he has only been playing football since the end of his high school days. So he has not been playing the game that long. He's just that instinctive of a player. He can play in the slot. He can play outside. It would be a stunner if he is not starting across from Tariq Woolen in week 1. You picked him 5th overall for a reason. He can do a little bit of everything. He is a hard hitter. He's got ball skills. He's savvy with his coverages. He understands what offenses are doing. So he was a guy that I had on their radar, pick 5. Not a lot of people were talking about, so I wasn't that surprised when they took him. But this is a player that really screams Seahawks secondary with the players they've had under Pete Carroll.
Now, they brought back linebacker Bobby Wagner after however many years he was gone. What does his return to the defense mean for this unit?
Really, the stability and the leadership are the first 2 things. And Jordan Brooks had a really solid season last year before he tore his ACL in week 17 as that replacement guy in the middle, but they really missed the glue guy that is Bobby Wagner and the weight that he carries in the locker room. And, oh, by the way, maybe he's lost a step or 2, but he's still a damn good football player. Mm-hmm. Second team All-Pro, and he deserved that playing for a bad Rams team. He was one of the few bright spots for them last year. And so once the Rams and Wagner agreed that, you know what, let's separate after this year, it's a cost-cutting move for the Rams. Wagner wanted to come back to Seattle all along. The Seahawks were in a better position to be able to bring him back. And so I think that this made both parties really excited. And he can still play. He's still really effective against the run. Coverage may be the area of his game where he's maybe lost a little bit, but he can still get the job done there fairly well. And his leadership, what he's going to bring to the entire defense from that regard, I think that's the most important thing that he's going to bring back. They were 30th against the run last year. I can't see that happening with Bobby Wagner in the middle. He is going to make a lot of those plays that got away from them last year. Just having him out there is going to make that run defense better by default.
On each side of the ball, what is the biggest remaining question that has to be answered before week 1?
On offense, it's that interior offensive line. Now, I'm under the belief that they are going to be better than they were last year because they're going to have either Evan Brown, who was really solid at center when he had his opportunities with the Lions last 2 years, or they're going to have rookie Olu Oluwatimi from Michigan, who was the Remington Award winner, best center in college football last year, didn't give up a sack for Michigan. One of those two is going to be starting at center. I think both of them are significant upgrades over Austin Blythe, who started for them last year and then announced his retirement. And at right guard, Gabe Jackson has had a really good career, but he was not the Gabe Jackson of old last season. Bulky knee, wasn't moving well, struggled in pass protection. Phil Haynes or Anthony Bradford, the 4th-round pick out of LSU, they're going to have growing pains because neither one of them started very many games in the NFL. Haynes has not started much in his 4 seasons in the league, but you're going to have a younger player that's got upside that can develop and plays with some physicality. I think they're going to be better at that position as well, given the youth and the upside they've got there. So that's really the big question mark, though. What's that interior O-line going to look like by the time we get to the start of the season? How do they develop as the season unfolds? And on defense, it's in the trenches as well. They had to play musical chairs because part of the reason they were 30th against the run, that defensive line last year was way worse than anybody thought they were going to be. All the experience they had, and yet they were getting gashed on the ground. They pretty much completely retooled that group. Draymond Jones was their big fish they signed in free agency. They're really excited to unleash him. He's only 26, has room to grow, but they don't have Poona Ford anymore. Al Woods is gone. Quentin Jefferson's gone. Shelby Harris is still a free agent. Who knows if he's going to come back to the Seahawks before the season starts, but they've basically completely overhauled that group. They've got some young players, including rookies Mike Morris and Cam Young, they really like, but there's a lot of uncertainty there. Can you still get something out of Jaron Reed in his second stint in Seattle too? There's just a lot of question marks there. The group could be good. There's some intrigue there. At the same time, it remains to be seen whether they're really going to be much better than last year's group, which that was probably the weakest point of their football team a year ago.
Now, when you size up, and again, rosters haven't been set, I get that, but we have an idea of who's going to be on the rosters, the core players. So when you size up the Seahawks versus the Giants, we'll start with the Seahawks offense versus the Giants defense. Who has the advantage and why, do you think, at this point?
I would go with the Seahawks there just, again, because I look at, and this is not a slight on the Giants, I think they've got plenty of talent on defense, but I think Seattle has addressed the offensive line, which that is the biggest issue going against the Giants. They have had issues blocking their defensive line with all the talent there, Dexter Lawrence, Leonard Williams, those guys up front. They've had issues in the past. I do think this offensive line is at least going to be league average, which is an upgrade compared to what they were a year ago. And then all the weapons that they have. The Giants have had some changes in their secondary. I would take Jackson Smith and Jigba, Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, and the group of tight ends Seattle has against the Giants secondary. 9 out of 10 games. I would expect them to have an advantage there as long as Geno has time to get the football to him. So again, this is not a slight on the Giants, but I think that the Seahawks offense, at least potential-wise, they should be in the top 3 to 5 in scoring offense this year with all the pieces that they've assembled. And Shane Waldron coming back, calling the shots. This should be an offense that most defenses really struggle with this year.
All right. And then what about Giants offense versus Seattle defense?
Well, Saquon Barkley's contract situation obviously is one to watch right now. But even though Seattle shut him down, that was the only game last year that they could stop the run, interestingly enough. But that would still be the thing that really scares me because, again, I don't know if Seattle's defensive line is much better than it was last year, and that was a major problem. They gave up a lot of rushing yards, 30th in the NFL in that category. And if you've got Saquon Barkley with an upgraded O-line, I really like John Michael Schmitz in the middle of that line now. So I think that the Giants, from a passing game standpoint, I think Seattle's got the edge with their secondary, how talented that group is compared to the receivers. But the tight end, Darren Waller, is going to be a problem. Seattle's had issues with tight ends, and the run game really worries me. And so I'm going to take a cop out here and say this is a little bit of a wash, because it really boils down to I would give the Seahawks the advantage in the passing game on defense. But I would say that the Giants' run game with Saquon Barkley and company really would scare me in a matchup between these two teams.
What do you view as the X factor here with regards to this matchup?
I would certainly say that it's the pass rushers on the outside. I think that ultimately you can mitigate the run game a little bit if you are finding ways to get sacks and you're putting teams behind the sticks. And Seattle's got a lot of talent there, but they haven't really had a player develop as that number one, that go-to player. Uchenna Nwosu maybe becomes that player this year, but he has been a really good number two to this point. Darrell Taylor's been inconsistent when he's been good. He's been really good, though, so if you can find some consistency from him. Boy, Mafe, Derek Hall, they just drafted. I mean, they've got some names there, but is one or two of those players going to be able to emerge as double-digit caliber sack guys? If that happens, and they're able to do that against the Giants with all the capital they put into their offensive line, if they can get after Daniel Jones and they can get some sacks the way they did in the game last year, then that puts the Giants behind the sticks, and I think it gives the Seahawks more of an advantage to the strengths of their defense.
Corbin, great stuff. I appreciate the breakdown on the Seattle Seahawks. He is Corbin Smith, Locked On Seahawks. Check him out. He's also a writer for, what is it, Seahawks Country or Seahawks?
All Seahawks.
All Seahawks. I should have known that, right? Which is part of the Foundation Network on SI.com. So check out his work there. Corbin, we will see you again later in the season for the crossover show.
Sounds good. Monday Night Football.
That's right. That's right. I think at the Meadowlands too, right?
Exactly. Yeah, but it'd be my first trip to the Meadowlands as a reporter. So looking forward.
All right. Awesome. Well, then I'll catch up with you then.